Hello. So I'm talking about the Dhammapada. I think this is the third day. And I'm moving on now to the third section, which is the section on the mind. And a few things to say first, because, the Dhammapada is very uncompromising. And, it tells us how it is. And it tells us if we behave this way, this will be the results. And if we behave another way, that will be the results. So it can seem to us today to be very black and white about how things are. And I don't think we find that very easy, very palatable in our culture today. And that's because we probably much prefer everything to unfold in a very natural way, and we do a bit of meditation and hope for the best. But actually, if we really want to discover, I suppose, the power of meditation and the power of practice, practicing the precepts, practicing compassion and so on, then it does take effort. It is a practice. It's something that takes time as well as effort. It's not going to happen all at once. And there are very strong images throughout the Dhammapada. Very old-fashioned ones, obviously, being from a very different time, but also very strong images. Personally, I'm very open to those images. I really, it makes me think, it makes me think because we have such an easy life by comparison to a lot of other people in the world, and certainly to how life used to be. So most of the time we don't have to make much effort to have a relatively comfortable, easy life. And we can just end up taking that for granted, and it can make us very lazy. So anyway, here we are at the third section, the mind. And it begins, as a fletcher straightens his arrow, so the wise one straightens his unsteady mind, which is so hard to control. So do you think your mind's hard to control? I think we do find particularly when we start meditation and we're asked to follow the breath. I mean, it sounds such a simple thing, doesn't it? And we find that actually the mind is hard to control. It's hard to do what we intend to do. And we certainly see that in meditation when we want to be calm and open and undistracted, and we follow a couple of breaths and then our mind has gone elsewhere. So we know, if we look closely, we know that our mind does require training if we're going to understand the mind, if we're going to know the mind. So it's a bit like there's veils between us and our mind. We don't really understand it, and that's why often we can feel really frustrated in meditation if our mind's wandering all over the place and we think, well, this is just frustrating because, I intended to follow the breath and now I'm elsewhere. Maybe I just can't meditate. Maybe it's for everyone else. Well, of course, that's rubbish, because we can train our mind if we want to, but we've got to, in a way, think it's worth it. That's where faith comes in, really. That whatever you decide, whatever practice you follow, whether it's Buddhism or Catholicism or Tai Chi, whatever system of development one follows, you need to give it to yourself wholeheartedly. You need to give yourself the time and the effort put into that practice, because otherwise you will never know what its potential is. You can't know unless you really give yourself to it. So, yes, the fletcher straightens his arrow as the wise one straightens his unsteady mind, which is so hard to control. So there is a control element, there's no question about it. And there's an interesting balance to be got, I think, in practice between effort, between really applying oneself and being relaxed and open. And I think initially, when we first come across the Dharma, it does need that sense of effort. because otherwise I think we're all over the place. Anyway, I wanted to talk about some of the later verses in the mind section. So it's more or less the last 4 verses. Knowing that the body is as fragile as a jar and making the mind as firm as a fortress, one should attack the tempter with a weapon of wisdom and guard one's conquests carefully. So knowing that the body is as fragile as a jar, so that's like a clay pot, and it's broken very easily, just as our body is. So that's reminding us that we need to be aware of impermanence and the fragility of the body. It gets ill, it lets us down, it gets old, and it dies. So when we really know that, that does affect our intention, our purpose, our resolve. It must do, because then we know how precious life is. We know that actually there is no time to be lost. We're not going to be young forever. We're not going to be fit forever. So knowing that the body is as fragile as a jar and making the mind as firm as a fortress. So that's an interesting contrast, isn't it? It's the mind that we can build up, if you like. We can make our mind much more powerful than we can ever make our body. So that's interesting, isn't it? One should attack the tempter with a weapon of wisdom. So the tempter, of course, is Mara, is you could say all our weaknesses, all our tendencies to want that easy life and to take the easy option. So often we look for instant pleasure. And when we look for instant pleasure, it means that we don't look for the longer term. What's really worth having. When I reach for a chocolate biscuit or whatever it is, at the back of my mind, I'm just forgetting that actually I want to keep my weight down so that I can move about more easily. And we are easily swayed. We're easily tempted. With the weapon of wisdom and guard one's conquest carefully. So here, I interpret one's conquest is the benefits that we get from meditation. And yes, I think I mentioned yesterday that Sangharakshita, I read a bit out from him where he says that there's no standing still, there's only slipping back, unless we're making that effort all the time. And so, yes, it might be that for a while we meditate daily and we think, we know there's benefits to that. But then we don't guard our conquest of, having a regular meditation practice. We slip, don't we? We slide. We take the easy path, as it were, or it all seems too much effort. So we need to keep making that effort. And the verse after that says, before long, the body will lie on the ground, cast aside, and devoid of consciousness like a useless log of wood. So that's very strong. It's a very strong image, isn't it? It's not very pleasant. And it just reminds us that we do need to reflect on how brief life is and how there is no time to be lost, because as sure as anything, we do know for certainty, and we don't know much for certainty, that that our body will be cast aside. Nobody wants to spend long with a dead body. Devoid of consciousness like a useless log of wood. We will be no good to anybody then. And people will flee from us, So, this verse isn't about making us depressed or anything, but kind of waking us up to the truth of there's no time to be lost, basically. We need to know that our body is fragile, and we need to put in that effort. And then the last two verses of this passage says, whatever a hater may do to one he hates, or an enemy to his enemy, a wrongly directed mind will do greater evil. Whatever a hater may do to one he hates, or an enemy to his enemy, a wrongly directed mind will do greater evil. So I think we often don't understand, don't see that how powerful our mind is. And I think that's, well, partly because we can't see it, it's like we tend to think of it as private to ourselves. And, well, it doesn't really matter what I think, does it? It doesn't really matter what I feed my mind with. But actually what we feed our mind with is just as important as what we feed our body with. So, we're much better at knowing about feeding our body with healthy food. But at the same time, there's a lot of unhealthy things that we can be feeding our mind with, certainly from the media. Yes, whether it's violence or pornography, we can think that that feeding ourselves with those things is kind of innocent, is a bit of entertainment, but actually it's colouring our mind all the time. So we've got choices, as I keep saying. We have got choices, and we need to make those choices. The last verse of the mind section says, neither father nor mother nor any other relative will do you so much good as a well-directed mind. So that's a reminder that it's up to us. It doesn't matter how good our friends are, our parents are to us, they can only do so much. Finally, it's up to us. It's up to us to make those choices and decide for ourselves. So that's a few comments on the mind section. And bear in mind that, there's lots of very substantial talks on Free Buddhist Audio about the Dhammapada and so on, that, I'm just giving tiny flavours and just things that are on my own mind. So, yeah, that's all for today. Bye for now.